Well, officially, good morning and welcome to Talk Shop Tuesday. I'm Linda Jackson from Food Focus, and it's great to have you with us today as we're talking all things vegan and vegetarian with SGS. Our sponsor today is none other than SGS, and it's a delight for us to be working with them. Thank you so much to Donna Crockart-Brown and her team for allowing us to continue with this series of webinars. It's been great to work with them, and we're really looking forward to having some conversation today about this particular scheme that they are involved with. And so without further ado, let's have a look at what SGS is all about and watch this short video with me as we find out more about their services within South Africa.
Our purpose is really to enable sustainable growth by enhancing knowledge, skills, and processes. So as part of that purpose, we are proud to announce our partnership with V-Label. We are promoting authenticity in vegan and vegetarian in food and wine products. So we've launched a product certification with V-Label to ultimately build consumer trust. And I'm looking forward to also learning today. It's something that I have a particular interest in and an aspiration to. So I hope you enjoy the talk shop today. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks so much, Donna. Me too. I would really like to learn the difference between some of these labels because I feel like I'm a little bit illiterate in that regard. And so don't go away, Donna. We might have some questions for you at the end, but thank you so much for being with us today. Cool. Right, let's chat about this particular program and this partnership in terms of enhancing vegan and vegetarian trust in labeling. I think we've all seen the vegan and vegetarian products being available on our shelves. It's definitely a trend that's expected to continue. In fact, the recent research predicts that the global plant-based vegan market will reach 4.2 billion by the end of 2021, which is a growth rate of 17% just in 1 year. So that's phenomenal growth, and I'm sure there are many, many manufacturers that would like to be in on this. But as consumers, can we trust the labels that are on these products? Because at the end of the day, we do want transparency, and that's what this program is all about. And so to tell us more, I have two great speakers who will be taking us through some conversation this morning and some presentations. So I'd like to ask Donovan to join me as I introduce him. Donovan, won't you switch your camera on so everyone can see who Donovan Will is? Thanks, Donovan. So Donovan is, before becoming the ProVeg brand manager, before ProVeg rather, he was the brand manager at the Fry Family Food Company. I think we all know them as Fry's. And he was a director at, he's also a director at the South African Vegan Society, and he's part of the Veggielicious Cape Town team. He has a passion for connecting key stakeholders and demonstrating how healthy, delicious, and ethical food choices can lead to, first of all, greater food security, improved equality within our country, as well as the more efficient use of resources. And sometimes he feels like the only reason he joined ProVeg is that he gets to eat lots of fries, nuggets, and Beyond Meat products. So he's a good tester as well. Donovan, we'd love to hear more about this whole scheme and what's happening in the vegan and vegetarian market within South Africa. So won't you join us on screen now? Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. So yeah, I'm Donovan from ProVeg South Africa, and just a little introduction about what we do. We're the South African branch of ProVeg International, which is an international food awareness organization that's working to transform the food system from one that's mostly focused on animal agriculture towards one that's a lot more dependent on plant-based agriculture and also cellular-based agriculture, which is the new tech thing of growing meat in labs. And in South Africa, we specifically offering services like consulting in the food space, product development. We worked with a company called Feinschmecker, which landed up being South Africa's first meat company to produce a vegan line of meat replacements, which was quite exciting. We do product development for menus. So we've recently worked with Burger King, and then obviously the vegan certification through V-Label, which is currently Europe's biggest vegan mark. And they've got 30,000 products around the world at the moment. We also do public awareness campaigns, like our recent Diet Change Not Climate Change campaign, which was a short advert on ETV, as well as billboards around the country, on about 80 billboards, talking about greenhouse gas emissions, sort of to coincide with COP. We also run more specific plant-based campaigns like Veganuary and Veggie Challenge, Meat-Free May. So there are lots of opportunities for brands to get involved there. And then lastly, just education and community building. We do have regional groups in Cape Town, Joburg, and Durban, but our head office in South Africa is in Cape Town. And just a little bit about the landscape. So it's very difficult for us in South Africa compared to other countries to give you really good data on what's happening. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, it's a lot newer in South Africa, which means that for a lot of the categories, there isn't good concise categorization across retailers. So earlier this year, ProVeg approached Nielsen to get some data on market sizing, and we had a really big problem trying to get market data for plant-based meat, for plant-based milk. And the reason was that the different retailers aren't all classifying all of the products in the same way. And so when we got the data tables, we saw that some plant-based milks on the list weren't actually plant-based, and some plant-based milks that we knew were available on shelf weren't on the list. And the same with the meat alternatives, because some retailers are calling meat alternatives, some of them are calling them frozen meals, some of them are calling them frozen vegetarian options. So that's one of the challenges we have. What we do know is that South Africa generally follows the trends in Europe, and we have some really exciting data out from there. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into all of it, but there's a big project in Europe that ProVeg is working on called the Smart Protein Project. And a recent survey by Nielsen of, I think, 11 countries showed that the market's basically increased by about 49% over the last 2 years. So that's obviously phenomenal growth in the food space. And in South Africa, we can see a lot of anecdotal evidence that there's definitely a demand. When we look specifically at questions around vegan and vegetarian, I think it's important to realize that if you're in the food space, that's not necessarily the market that you're looking at. The market that we're looking at here is the people who are buying plant-based alternative products, and that's not only the vegans and vegetarians. According to market data from Nielsen and Unilever in South Africa, only 0.1% of South Africans are vegan or plant-based, but 14% of South Africans are eating what we would call a flexitarian diet, and that means that 14% of South Africans are cutting back on animal products, specifically for one of the pros of eating more plant-based, which health reasons, environmental reasons, it can be food justice reasons, obviously animal ethics reasons, and then also more and more taste, which a lot of people would be surprised about, but trust me, if you tasted some of these new products, you would see that. But with that data, it's still very difficult to see. With the Unilever data, they were quite comprehensive and they tracked all LSMs across South Africa, but even tracking that, they're still not capturing everyone in the market. We're not seeing what people who are sort of not involved in the formal economy are eating. And that raises the question of, where is this market? So the market for meat alternatives, a lot of people think that it's a market for only the wealthy. When we have products like Beyond Meat and Oatly and products that are being imported and sold for a very high price, we think that it's an exclusive movement. But the reality is we've had products like Imama soy mince for a long time. We've had these meat replacements at the bottom end of the market as well. And so there's kind of a dual economy when it comes to plant-based as well. We have people eating whole food plant-based diets that are really affordable, and then people looking for these more niche products that do land up costing a little bit more, quite a bit more in some cases. So we have also recently worked with a company called KLA Research to do some market research in South Africa. We are not quite ready to release those results. And what that's looking at isn't just how many people are plant-based or eating flexitarian or meat eaters. That's looking at the barriers to entry for consumers. That's looking at why people have switched over if they have, why people haven't switched over if they haven't, who would or wouldn't. And then also some questions around brand recognition and which plant-based brands are sort of dominating in South Africa. When we look at the news in South Africa, we definitely see big increases. If you look at the plant-based news specifically, you'll see lots of new vegan restaurants popping up. You'll see lots of new vegan products landing up on shelf. And the latest launch I went to was Just Egg, probably the world's best egg replacement out of America. But we have all of the top products in the categories for meat, for cheese, for dairy, for butter. A company called Infinite Foods brings in some of the top products, and they recently had a clean sweep at an award ceremony in London of the world's best plant-based brands. So South Africans do have access to some of the best brands in the world. But what that means is that there are big opportunities here for us, because if we can import these products and sell them to the market and have a viable market for these products at the prices that they're at, that means that South African manufacturers hopefully would be able to produce them at a cheaper price, both because these products are being produced in countries like America, in places like California, and obviously in Europe. So our import costs should be a little bit lower, and then obviously we don't have to pay import duties and transport costs. Internationally, we see it's growing even faster than in South Africa. If you look at big companies like Beyond Meat, they have huge market capitalizations. I think as of today, it's $5 billion just for Beyond Meat. So we know that the market's expecting to grow, and we have some estimates there, and they're all vary dramatically depending on who we're speaking to and also what the definition of the specific market is. In South Africa, it's very interesting that we've already started seeing new products that aren't available anywhere else in the world, like vegan boerewors or vegan biltong, which again is quite an interesting phenomenon, because some of this product, when tested overseas, ranked very highly because the consumer overseas didn't even know what vegan biltong was. So when they tasted it, even if it might not taste 100% exactly like biltong that South Africans know, it's still a brand new, exciting product for them. And another big thing when we look at plant-based in South Africa is that we're not just looking at these alternative products in their finished form. When we look in South Africa, we're obviously a company that had a country with a lot of agriculture, and there's some interesting stats where you look at things like we're one of the biggest exporters of macadamia nuts, and macadamia milk is one of the most popular milks at the moment globally, but we're producing very, very, very little of it. Almost no commercial macadamia milk in South Africa, and most of the macadamia milk we're importing from either Australia or Europe. So there again, another big opportunity for South African brands to get involved, and again, also the government to say, this is not just a case of we saying, let's not farm any animal products. We're saying there's big opportunities financially in this space as well. Some of the research that ProVeg has specifically done, we've done quite a bit of research in Europe, a consumer survey, and the consumer survey was basically to find out where the next big opportunities in plant-based are, and we identified vegan cheese and ready meals, and I think that's something that is exactly the same in South Africa. Again, we're going to have this research coming out soon, specifically for the South African market. We are also busy compiling a product catalog of all of the alternative products in South Africa. So if you do have alternative products and you haven't heard from us, please get in touch with us. We're going to have this catalog, and it's going to help us to go back to Nielsen and give them a catalog of all of the products so that we can get very accurate market sizing data. And then lastly, we're busy working on a fast food rankings. Some of us still love fast food, even though we're trying to eat a little bit more healthily. And so, as you can see with the big launch from Burger King of their new plant-based options, which were certified by V-Label, which I think Gula might mention a little bit later, we want to look at which of the fast food chains are actually making the biggest strides in this area. And again, it's not just the idea of we want to serve those 0.1% of the market that's vegan or plant-based, or even that we want to serve the percentage, the 14% or higher, that's flexitarian. We want to look at that veto vote. So I'm plant-based. If I go out for dinner with 8 of my friends and they say, where should we go? We're obviously very unlikely to go to a place that doesn't have good vegan or plant-based options, because I wouldn't have anything to eat. So if we look at the menu of a restaurant and that restaurant doesn't have an option for me, that means that that restaurant actually loses 8 consumers. And that, I think, is a big driver of what we're seeing now, is just having that option for the people who want it, so that you don't lose out on a larger group of people. And there's so much more that I could speak about, but I think maybe we could ask the audience if there's any questions at this moment.
Yeah, Donovan, I think that's definitely something that we should be doing. So everybody out there, let's hear what your vegan, vegetarian or flexitarian questions are while we have Donovan on the line. And please won't you pop them into the question bar so that we can read them out to him and share them with him. Okay, Donovan, so a couple of things while we're waiting. So there's a very important research paper that's obviously coming, and we're all going to wait that with bated breath, because that's going to give us a little bit more accuracy regarding what is actually happening in the South African market. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, it's not a huge sample, but it is going to start giving us an idea of why people are making certain decisions. You know, in South Africa, it's one thing to say that 14% of South Africans are eating a flexitarian diet, or 2% of them are eating vegetarian, but we don't always know the reason for that. If someone's eating a fully plant-based diet, it might be purely for financial reasons. Samp beans is the most affordable meal that can give you most of the nutrients you need. So we want to start asking those questions. What do people know about it? What are people's perceptions of it? And that should help a lot with product development, and also for marketing and how we market these products in South Africa. In many cases, we just tend to try and follow Europe, but what works in Europe from a marketing point of view often doesn't work in South Africa.
Yes, yeah, and I think that is important. So while we may follow the trends, we can't say that that's necessarily going to fit for the majority of the South African consumers, because it isn't the same level of sophistication. We were chatting a little earlier about the fact that South Africa almost does have 2 spectra. So you mentioned the fact that we've got, I think, 0.1% of consumers are vegan or vegetarian. We've got 14% that are eating this flexitarian diet. But yet, like you said, Samp beans actually is a plant-based product, plant-based diet, and that could be the majority of the market. I think understanding why people are making these choices is important, because is it that we have a sophisticated market in Europe that is very pro-sustainability, really understand the impact of some food production systems better than the average South African? Do you think that's driving what's happening in Europe?
So I think this thing is way more complicated than a lot of people think. When I went plant-based, I thought, oh well, it's people are either choosing plant-based or not for health reasons, environmental reasons, or ethical reasons. But there's so much more to it. One of the biggest drivers in Europe is that meat prices are actually really high. So when you're choosing between the meat option and the vegetarian option or the vegan option, often the vegan option is cheaper. That is true in South Africa as well. In many cases, if you go to a restaurant, usually the falafel burger will be the cheapest one, or the veg curry will be the cheapest one. And that's a big driver. And I feel like in South Africa, that'll be one of the biggest factors when we reach price parity, when the products become more affordable. And there are some companies in South Africa who have sort of said that that's one of their aims. On the green side, which is probably one of the best chicken alternatives in the world, they're saying they're trying to push their prices lower and lower and prioritizing that. So I think that's one of the big things. And then the other thing is that, what you spoke about with the South African market, over 50% of South Africans live in poverty. And many of those South Africans aren't being included in this conversation at all from a research point of view. And when we look at what they're eating, that's something that we need the government to help us with, to understand, because it's one thing for us to survey people, but it's very difficult for us to reach that end of the market. And we're one of those countries. One of the pros that ProVeg has is food justice, and that's the idea that we're feeding more than 50% of the grains and crops in the world to animals, and then wealthier people are eating those animals. And there's a huge resource loss there. Obviously there's an energy conversion loss, and because of that, we're actually ramping up the price of staples like beans and legumes. So it's like a double-edged sword. One, we're exporting all these products and we don't have them available everywhere. So obviously Stampin' Beans is available in South Africa. But when we look at some other products in the fresh fruit and veg sections, there are food deserts in South Africa where it's very hard to get that. So we would like to see the government looking at that with us and saying, inequality can be addressed through the food system, because the current food system is increasing the inequality, not decreasing it. And I think that's one of the most exciting opportunities we have in this space from a government point of view.
So tell me a little bit about how sustainable it is to import all these products. In terms of energy conversion and, understanding that some, food manufacturing systems may obviously be very high in the consumption of energy, but obviously we have, the potential for greenhouse gases. But surely relying totally on an import market for some of these sophisticated high-end products, I have to say that's a little bit hypocritical. So surely we need to be consistent, when it comes to the approach, and wouldn't it be better to go local is lacquer?
So that's a great question, and it also lends itself to the conversation that we're going to be having about food labeling. Is that, we're going to have that, we're seeing it in Europe already, this push towards having food labeling, not just for vegan and vegetarian, but also to label the carbon emissions on different products. And at COP26 this year, they actually had it on all of the menus, at all of the official events. They had the carbon footprint of every meal that you ordered, so you would know. And the interesting thing with the plant-based food sector, again, you mentioned earlier, I worked at Fry's. When I was at Fry's, we did the calculation. We didn't do it ourselves. We had an external company come and do the carbon emission calculations. And even after importing the raw material, most of the non-GM soy in South Africa is imported, because most of the soy grown in South Africa is GMO soy. Even after importing it, we see that the plant-based products have significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions, significantly lower water usage and land usage, and that's because the biggest driver of the greenhouse gases and the land usage and the water usage is actually the growing of the product. So comparing growing soybeans to raising a cow. And so even after taking packaging into account and taking transport into account, even if it's across the world, and some of these products have had their carbon emissions audited, where they're sending, for example, mung beans or peas from South Africa to Southeast Asia for processing, and then from Southeast Asia to America for to be produced into a final product, and then from America shipped back to South Africa. So it is a huge inefficiency, and that's why we really also trying to work with companies to get more production happening in South Africa. I know, unfortunately, I can't announce it yet, but there is a big international plant-based brand that has committed to a factory in South Africa, which is really, really exciting. And again, when we're looking at certain products, that are available here, again, I might be biased because I work for Fry's, but why not support local where you can? If you are someone who wants to have the world's greatest burger, then obviously you probably want to go and get a Beyond Burger from Woolworths. But if you're just looking for a healthier, more sustainable option, then choosing local does have some difference. But when we're looking at the biggest difference, it's definitely the difference between plant-based and animal-based agriculture. That includes people who you'll say, but I have a small holding and I have a cow in my field, and that's how much damage am I doing? The manure gets used as fertilizer. It's a very closed system, and it's good for the environment. That's probably true. And if that's the case that you're in, and you're not worried about the ethical concerns or some of the health concerns, that's fine. But can we feed a nation in South Africa with that? And can we feed a global population? And we simply can't. The only reason we have factory farms is because it isn't actually possible for us to produce as much meat and eggs and dairy as the demand is from the international community without this confined farming. If everyone went free range and everyone had their own cow in the back garden, we would need 2 or 3 wolves to be able to contain that. So yeah, from an environmental point of view, the number one thing you can do is switch out as many animal products for plant-based products. And again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We work with a lot of companies who unfortunately can't make their products vegan, but they can reduce the amount of animal products in there, or at least reduce it or make some of their products lines plant-based, or if it's a restaurant, some of their menu items. It's the same. It's in South Africa, we saw this big ditch the straw campaign, because obviously single-use plastics is also a big issue. But most of the plastic in the sea is actually fishing nets and other pollution from fishing. So if you want to save the fish, the straw is obviously unnecessary, but the number one thing you can do is eat less fish. So in so many of these cases, you might look at different environmental things and say, well, we could probably lower it a little bit there on the import, or a little bit lower there on the packaging, but the biggest one is actually what the product is made of.
So are we ready to eat cell-based meat? Victoria's asking, do you really think there's a market for test tube burgers?
So that's really interesting question, and it's been a question that's actually been asked for about 10 years. That's the first time people started thinking about this. And there's been some interesting research out of America and Europe, and in South Africa. I'll give a little shout out to a friend of mine who's the CEO of Mzansi Meat. They are a company that is looking into this. They're obviously in R&D stage. They've done some research recently that just shows that, I think their research paper said about 30% of South Africans would definitely try it. And I think it's one of these things where it's, you know, a lot of consumers might be scared of it if they hear of it as test tube meat or whatever. But when we look at how we brew beer is grown in vats. Basically, the process is going to be very similar. It's just a different substrate, and we're using obviously animal DNA and not just yeast for the fermentation process. So when it's made and people see the final product, at the moment, almost all of the advertising of it, you know, when we see it on the news, we see these professors in the lab coats looking through a microscope. But obviously, when this is advertised, when the product is available, it's going to be advertised as for example, for steak, it's going to be advertised as a beautiful looking steak that we can control the amount of saturated fat in there. We can control for some carcinogens. Obviously, there's no antibiotics, there's no added hormones. So the product will probably be healthier. There's still a bit of a debate about some of the questions around that, but the people in the know who are working on these products are convinced that it's going to be a lot healthier, obviously a lot more sustainable. And then the biggest thing is how many consumers really care. So a lot of consumers at the top end of the market do care, but in South Africa, again, and this is important for everything, price and availability and convenience are the number one factors. So right now, when people go, I don't want to bash any fast food chains, but when people go to a fast food chain and order deep fried chicken or deep fried chicken nugget, they have no idea what goes into that deep fried chicken nugget. They have no idea, and most of them don't care. So when we get to the point where cell-based meat reaches price parity, which some of the companies in Europe are saying is 5 to 10 years away, when the price of having a lab-grown product is cheaper than raising a cow, when we look at the environmental and the ethical and the health concerns, I have no doubt that South Africans would jump on board and eat it.
So what about local products? Lisa would like to know about sort of indigenous food or plant-based products. I mean, morogo, amarante, you know, we've got some great vegetables here that we're probably not getting the maximum benefit out. You know, are those part of the new menu that we can expect? You know, not just, you know, other products, but what about traditional South African products?
Yeah, so I think that's a big thing, and we're also working with some partners in a small way to try and sort of endorse this. And again, I think it's something that the government through their sort of trade hubs needs to really focus on. Products like sorghum, which is a local product, have tons of health benefits, and we're only starting to see sorghum being added in a big way in the culinary world. But even something like plant-based milk, you can actually make sorghum milk, and I've seen it. There's an American company doing it, and again, it's bizarre. Why are we not doing that here? So when we're looking at these products, I think it's a case of, you know, the more and more demand there is for these kind of products, the more people are going to be looking for them. And it's really good to see some of the really big international sort of food conglomerates like Unilever specifically looking and saying, we want to source more plant or more, you know, they are looking for more plant-based, but more locally produced food. And Knorr has their, through Unilever, through Knorr. Unilever has the Future 50 Foods project, which is specifically looking at that. They're looking for foods that are sustainable, that are healthy, that are good for the planet. And they've identified 50 different foods. And one of the factors that they're looking at is local food that is indigenous, food that is obviously, being grown in the environment and the climate that it's meant to be growing in, which obviously often saves water and things like that. So again, it is a slow process, but when you've got these big players on board, that's very helpful. And again, I think it's difficult for big business to be the ones who are driving the smaller sort of subsistence side of this. And a lot of people who are very passionate about using more local products don't have the support that they need. So ProVeg would love to help anyone there. If anyone is producing or distributing local products and they want some help from us, we can see what we can do. But again, I think this is somewhere where government really needs to prioritize that. And at the moment, the government is prioritizing a lot of animal agriculture. So poultry farming is being promoted a lot more than sort of local grains. It's difficult for a farmer to just say, oh, I was farming wheat and now I'm going to go farm sorghum. It's not something that's very simple, and there's a lot of regulations and there are a lot of bodies that sort of control that sort of thing. So we need to see a lot of that being dealt with at a policy level.
Super. Thanks, Donovan. Please stay on the line because we may have some questions at the end, but we've come to the end of our slot now. Thank you so much for your presentation. Some very, very interesting developments, and we look forward to the results of that research. Thank you so much. Gulam, would you like to join us? He's the newest member of the ProVeg team, and for the past 30 years, he's had senior positions in media, finance, and all of those tech spaces, and he's now works as ProVeg Corporate Engagement and Fundraising Manager, and he's also the administrator of the V label, which is obviously what he's going to be talking to us in more detail. And he, in fact, is a vegan and has been so for 4 decades. I like it when you put your money where your mouth is from that perspective. But eating this way, he can actually see a significant shift and an increase in consumer awareness, as well as this demand that we've been chatting about. And so we're really very, interested to hear how you're going to use this experience to promote and develop the plant-based sector within South Africa. And so, Gulam, over to you. Thank you so much. I'm now sending you a presenter request so that we can see your presentation. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, and hi, and good morning to everyone. So I'm going to step straight into my presentation on V-Label. You've heard a little bit about it so far, and share a brief overview of the labeling standard, as well as some insights that we've gathered from a recent international survey that we conducted, which clearly highlights the importance and effectiveness of food labeling when it comes to vegan and vegetarian products from the consumer's perspective. So a little bit about V-Label. Oops, sorry, I'm just going to, there. So V-Label is an international recognized registered seal for labeling vegan and vegetarian products and services. It actually started back in 1996 in Switzerland under the European Vegetarian Union, and eventually moved over to be calling V-Label in the mid-2000s. So we're currently in 50 countries around the world, and recently, as of the last 3 months, in South Africa. We are featured on over 40,000 products worldwide. And of that, we have about 3,500 licenses issued, and 3 of those companies have recently been signed up in South Africa. And just to note that we're the only international distributed and recognized label that offers local customer service in different languages, I might add. So our partners, so V-Label actually partners with different organizations and NGOs around the world. So here in South Africa and also in some other countries, we partner with ProVeg, who are the leading international plant-based food and awareness organization. And also we just recently signed an international or global contractor agreement with SGS to provide us with testing inspection partners. And you all know SGS. So the products that we do certify, we certify products in the cosmetic space, and that's cosmetics and body care products, as well as detergents and cleaning products. But we mainly focus on food. It's probably one of the biggest sectors that we're involved in. And that includes also beverages which are alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And then finally, all other non-food items, which could be clothing, printing materials, lubricants, and daily use articles, or really just anything that would be considered or classified as vegan or vegetarian. So our process for onboarding and signing up people in companies and organizations is pretty straightforward. We have obviously the query that comes through to us, which we follow up on. We then look through the client's details and their products. We position an offer to them. We step into a bit of a contract or an agreement to help them out with licensing. And then part of the process is we go through all their document checks. And this is them just basically recording all their products, their ingredients, their processes. We review that, and if need be, then we sometimes do an inspection. And if we find that everything meets our criteria, we then issue a license. And that license can be used by the company or the organizations for their marketing on their products, and any communication they want to send out that they're actually certified by the V-label. And then finally, what we do is we can do an inspection. Sometimes those are on-site inspections. But if most of the ingredients for some of the products are pretty straightforward and we have them categorized someplace, we're able to look them up and research them, we sometimes don't need to. We try to do an audit inspection, which happens maybe once a year. And that's where we look at the different processes. And if need be, then we start accessing some of our laboratory analysis testing if we need to look a little bit more deeper into some of the products. So the criteria, we really look at ingredients. So products have to be vegan or vegetarian on all stages of production. This includes non-declared processing aids. We look at the manufacturing process. So again, we need to look at the entire production line from start to finish, just to make sure we don't have any cross-contamination. And also non-GMO. So end product must not contain any genetically modified organisms that must be declared. And then finally, most importantly, that there's no animal testing. So animal testing on any products or ingredients that are carried out specifically for the end product. So the criteria more in detail. So basically, as I mentioned, products are considered vegan if they are not of any animal origin and in no stage of the production or processing has been made of or has the product been supplemented with ingredients or components. And some of the items around the criteria specifically is that to be considered as vegan, there's no meat or any other slaughtered products, no fish or any other marine animals, no eggs, no honey, which is also considered as not vegan, no milk, no wax, no fur, no leather, no royal jelly, no color agents or of animal origin, etc. So essentially, the V-label is a product certification that follows standardized criteria to ensure companies promote transparency and clarity to consumers buying vegan and vegetarian products. So all food and beverage products that wish to bear the V-label logo or trademark must comply with our scheme requirements, which include the unintended presence of non-vegan or non-vegetarian substances should be maintained below a 0.1% in the final product. So what we find is the majority of these products do, but if we do trace a specific ingredient, it could go back to perhaps having some instance where there could have been cross-contamination or something could have been introduced into the process. So we do have a threshold of 0.1%. Obviously, anything over that we don't consider as vegan. So for that reason, all stages of production, processing, and distribution should be designed in a way to prevent the unintended presence of non-vegan or non-vegetarian substances. So the V-label certification process involves a raw material and process risk assessment conducted by V-label, and then an on-site audit conducted by trained and qualified SDS auditors. So the result of the initial audit and the risk assessment define the frequency of the on-site audits. So again, we normally schedule one audit, which is on-site with a new customer or partner. And then if required, depending on the size of their operation or how often they might change their process, we will then schedule more on-site visits. So the annual V license is actually based on the organization of the company's turnover, the number of their products, and also, I think we also do on the speed of the licensing as well, how quickly they require a license. And that's basically our kind of a pricing model based around what we charge for the fees. So organizations are able to add more products to their license at any stage or time of the year following the following steps. And the site audit requirements are, it is issued by the local SGS office. This includes the audit and any relevant travel fees incurred. And we use SGS client questionnaire to obtain the typical information. So we also provide SGS with a criteria and a list. And then when they do the site audit, they return that to us. So the audit, who do we audit? We do production sites, preferably. That's really where we can find instances of cross-contamination. And also if machinery is being used for other products, we're able then to assess whether there is any elements there that we could either could be critical, or we could address, or we could make recommendations to change. And this is usually announced, so no surprise visits. We make the appointments, we go through, and normally this is done with organizations which are also doing their own formal risk analysis. And this is any product that falls under the V-label certification, whether it's a beverage or food, whether it's a clothing item or a cosmetic. So what we have found is that the customers globally are increasingly looking for healthy, ethical, and cost-effective products with low environmental impact. So this is driving the demand for vegan and vegetarian alternatives. But as manufacturers reflect the trend that more sustainable branding, packaging, and food content sells, it is much harder to identify products that are actually vegan. And you've probably seen that in South Africa, where we're getting a lot of packaging which has a lot of claims on it, but it's hard for some of these producers to substantiate them. So a recent V-label survey and report shows that in a sea of options, consumers are increasingly relying on independent labeling to help them identify vegan and vegetarian options quickly, confidently, and with transparently. So we have conducted a survey recently, a global one, where we spoke to and surveyed about 23,000 shoppers, and this took place across 40 countries, which are mainly across Europe and South America, where the V-label is prominent. And of that, we found that 91% of the consumers prefer products with a certificate, such as the V-label. 95.4% claim that they've seen the V-label, so they're aware of our branding, they've seen it on products. And 89% of the consumers consider V-label as a useful when shopping. So they actually use it as a guide when they're in the shopping mall or when they're in the retailer to actually look for the label itself. And this is really kind of built on trust, and this is one of the cornerstones of V-label. So that 92% would buy the product once they notified carries the V-label. So again, they trust the V-label, so therefore they trust the product and the manufacturer. 95% consider themselves better informed thanks to the V-label. So they've either heard about the product via V-label or had some information about it prior. And 87.8% say the products with the V-label symbol make shopping easier, which obviously convenience is a big factor when it comes to people who are in a rush going to the shop and don't have time just to read all the labels. So with increased visibility, we found that 79% consciously pay more attention to products with the V-label, 64% claim they look for products with the V-label, and 78% generally trust products with the V-label more. So overall, customers associate with the V-label, 96% found it was better orientation when buying, 95% easier product selection, 95% higher credibility, 56% higher premium on quality products, and 50% found that the V-label kind of directs them towards being more healthy. So again, just to kind of recap, so just with things like visibility, credibility, and convenience around product labeling, 79% of consumers globally agree that they consciously pay more attention to products with a V-label symbol. 61% claim that they are looking for products with a V-label symbol when shopping. 64% prefer to buy products with a V-label symbol that similar to products without it. And 78% worldwide generally trust products with V-label symbol more than products without it. And I think just for the sake of time, there's a lot more detail I can go into, but I just wanted to show an exercise that we did recently with one of our clients, and some of you have probably heard of or maybe even tried. One of the more visible V-label certified products, which was Burger King, and we helped them with their campaign. So this is also something that V-label assists with in the marketing side to make sure after the process is complete that we assist the client or the partner with making sure that firstly the standard is visible to clients, and also that it is correctly branded, and that it helps client make the decision when they walk into any in-store or shop or restaurant. They see the logo, they understand what it means, they trust it, and they buy it. So again, that was just a quick overview of V-Label, and happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, really appreciate that. So if we chat about some of the points that have been raised by the audience, first one that comes up is, what about the nutritional aspects? So, I mean, you're checking cross-contamination, you're checking, you know, there's ethical issues, there's GMO issues, but what about nutrition? I mean, because at the end of the day, is it always really healthier? You know, when it comes to the quality of nutrition. I've got a comment here from someone who's been vegetarian for 40 years, 3 healthy pregnancies, no meat alternatives other than those that she's prepared herself, and she's been tasting some of these things, but it tastes like it's like dough, and it's more starch than anything else when you look at the label. Is that not an area that you know, V-Label is also looking at?
Well, not specifically, and I think that really comes down to the consumer's preference as well. So either you follow a diet which is extremely healthy, which can be very raw, and you just eat your fruits and vegetables straight off the vine or the tree, or you can take packaged foods. And packaged foods will have to, or they sometimes do, include preservatives and additives. So we really just look at, you know, the ingredients themselves. You know, we can't judge whether it's a good ingredient or a bad ingredient. We just have to look at it by our criteria, whether it qualifies as being vegan, so that there's no animal product in it, which is really kind of what we're focused on, or no animal contaminants. And as we see, I think as we step into areas of food development, a lot of these alternative products are getting better. I think we're still in a lot of the development stage. So, you know, a lot of the products which hits the shelf, there's a lot of preservatives to keep them, you know, extend their shelf life. But I think as we go on, we're realizing that we can add other things. But again, that's really comes down to the food producers and the manufacturers and how they develop their foods. But from a V-Label perspective, you know, we recently did with Burger King, we did Pepsi. Now, Pepsi might not be considered as, you know, one of the most healthiest drinks out there, but it is something that is vegan, you know, ultimately. So I think on the shelf, when it comes to all the different fizzy drinks and soft drinks, I would probably get a Pepsi over any of the other ones, because I know that V-Label has looked at it. I've seen the ingredients. I know what goes into a Pepsi. I could probably make it at home. And it's not too, I would say, it doesn't have too many additives. In fact, I think I was quite surprised when I saw what the ingredients were and thought, well, okay, it doesn't seem quite threatening. I think just maybe the sugar level content is quite high. But again, that comes down to the consumer. Does the consumer want sugar, or do they want a diet without sugar? So again, we look at all the ingredients, the producers, the manufacturers expose all their ingredients. We have to see there's nothing hidden. So we have to see every single thing that goes into a product. And again, if there's anything that's questionable, if there's anything we feel might not fall within our criteria, then we obviously we won't go ahead and establish it. But it's a great question. Health is really kind of key, and it's up there for a lot of people when they make their decision making when they walk into a retailer or into a shop. But I think hopefully with the V-Label, they'll know that at least they don't have to worry about some of the things, some of the ingredients, that there won't be things in there like animal products, which are probably ultimately far unhealthier than some of the other additives which are going into some of these products to preserve them.
Yeah, I think it's just an interesting debate, because the two are not necessarily, you know, it's not an automatic assumption that just because something is vegetarian or vegan, it's actually healthier in terms of nutritional value. And so I think that's important to bear in mind. The labels can still be misleading. Why is it necessary that products cannot be GM? So Victoria would like to know, you know, this is an interesting one that you've included as part of the V-Label. Can you give us a bit of understanding around that?
Yeah, so it's a category that we're still looking at, because I mean there's a lot of variables when it comes to genetically modified. So we do look at it. Initially, we did say when it came to vegan and vegetarian products that we wanted to make sure that it wasn't, because it is something that is very, very difficult to do analysis on. But now, thanks to SGS and other organizations who are developing these kind of DNA kits for us to look at actually specific vegan content and ingredients, we can actually look at some of the GMO stuff as well. We can look at its origin, and we can look at its production and how it was produced as an additive. So it is open. We are looking at it as well. Initially, the criteria did say that we weren't accepting it, but I think that also comes from a day where GMOs were very, very difficult to break down. But I think now is moving into being able to do the analysis a little bit better and have a better understanding of it. That's something that we will consider going forward as to whether that's something we want to include. But initially, GMO wasn't something that we really looked at, again, because it was quite difficult for us to do a proper analysis on.
Cool. Okay, well, that hopefully, Victoria, that helps. But I think it may, depending on where we are and what products we're considering and what the basis of those products could be, that could definitely be a hurdle for some manufacturers, because having to import, for example, non-GMO maize into South Africa is going to definitely come as a cost. And how would we offset that? So that's an interesting one. And interesting also from your research. A lot of your consumers coming from South America as well as Europe. Interestingly, not North America. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, so it's really V-Label's presence. So V-Label is quite prominent in Europe and now moving into Asia. The other countries we have a very small. We've just started again in North America. South America a little bit more established. So we're able to do a little bit more of a bigger consumer poll or pool there to survey. So again, it's also how long the V-Label has been established in a country, its recognition of the brand itself, how many products it's on. South America has quite a few, so it's not something quite foreign. So here in South Africa, hopefully maybe by next year we do a survey, we include South Africa as well. We have more V-Label products on the shelf, and with a little bit more marketing around it, that we can actually start surveying some of our citizens here as to whether they recognize the brand and what there would be. But again, South America there's a lot of meat alternative and dairy alternative products there. V-Label it kicked off there a few years ago. It's doing relatively well. It's signing up left, right, and center. So again, it was a country we want to include in the international survey, and we got good results back from it. But we will find that because V-Label has been around for over 30 years now, I think in Europe, that it is far more recognized as one of the labeling standards, within across the EU.
It's interesting, South America. I'm just looking at it from the point of view of, we often kind of compare ourselves to countries within South America from an economic situation. Is the drive in that area linked to what Donovan was saying around, price parity, but also, when it comes to, I'm going to say the lower end of the market, looking for alternatives to meat because meat's becoming very expensive? Is that the drive?
Yeah, you'll find with South America, and not to talk as an expert on the country or its import-export, but it does export a lot of its meat to other countries. So a lot of the animal agriculture is predominantly within the South America to service other countries, and that is really North America, and I think they do export to Europe as well. So I think again, it's availability of certain food products to people on the lower end of the scale, and obviously those on the higher end of the scale can afford and have access to. So we become I guess innovative. We become we look for things, alternatives. And also we look for traditional foods, which are sometimes we'll find are actually by nature or by chance just happen to be vegan or vegetarian. We have that here in South Africa as well. A lot of traditional foods are vegetarian. So I think in South America we have the same. I think it's looking at people look at traditional foods. It's not really meat based. It's a lot of vegetable based, and also there's a drive to become more healthy. South America, there's a lot of there's a huge movement around climate change and the impact of animal agriculture on climate change itself. So again, I think as we become a little bit more educated and a little bit more aware, people are making those decisions when they go to the retailer or making food choices when it comes to diets and when buying as well, and saying, well, maybe I can choose the alternative, and that's going to be better for my health, the environment, and also everything down the line. So, but it is a good comparison when it comes to countries as how they're developed.
Yeah, definitely. Donna, wouldn't you mind joining us just for the last couple of questions? Donovan, too, please, would you mind switching on your camera? Right, everybody, you've got a last chance to pop your question into the question bar before I release these esteemed speakers to the rest of their Tuesdays. So please make sure that you use the opportunity. Donovan, sorry, Donna, I just wanted to ask a practical question around the scheme. You know, is SGS the first point of contact? You know, just practically speaking, Gulam took us through the process, but would SGS be the first place that I start if this is something that I'm interested in for my brand? Sorry, Donna, you're on mute. Won't you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Yes, so we would get our leads through our website mostly, and that would come through to our sales team, and they would initiate the contact with the client.
Super. Okay, and then the partnership and the way that it works with, you know, with regards to V-Label, then there's the seamless transition as a result of this, you know, this partnership. So that's great. So everyone, we know where the SGS offices are. We know where the SGS website is. So at least that is, you know, that's something that I'm sure that you're used to working with. Donovan, from your perspective, in terms of, you know, how this partnership is working together, and you know, just could kind of give me an overview in terms of how you and Gulam would work together within South Africa, and also just a bit about the consumer awareness.
Yeah, so I think a big part of this partnership is that we really don't want V-Label to just be a label. V-Label is going to be, you get a label, but we also want to be promoting the companies that are being endorsed by V-Label, really getting consumers to be aware of what's out there and be aware of why some products aren't opting for a label, especially people who are vegan for ethical or religious reasons. We really want them to understand what sort of risks there are involved in eating products that aren't certified vegan. And then from a marketing point of view, you know, we really want to be able to have a large group of companies that can work together almost in a way as a lobby for the plant-based food sector. At the moment, there isn't a unified body of plant-based manufacturers to sort of represent the sector. And I think if we can get V-Label to the point where we have enough clients, we can do that. And yeah, I don't know if Gulam wants to make a comment as well about that.
Yes, Gulam, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it really comes around. It's about education as well as a little bit of marketing on our side. So I think the more that we work with some of the bigger brands and they have trust in the V-Label and they use the V-Label, I think some of the other brands will follow suit as well. And I think we just saw with Burger King a couple of months ago, just because of the publicity we received, and we actually received global publicity on South Africa as being, you know, Burger King the first to accept and be endorsed by the V-Label. It did bring in some leads. We do have a lot of the other fast food companies who are now kind of, you know, doing up their laces and you know, want to get in the race and contacting us. So I think we're going to see a push for this. And I think at this stage, and it's happening globally as well, and it's a really, really good time, I think, for us to start talking about, you know, food labeling in South Africa and classification and standards, because we see now with, you know, the Department of Agriculture, you know, opening up conversations around, you know, new food regulations for meat and non-meat products. You know, does the classification fit with them? How do we do that? What are the definitions? And also with the Department of Health, you know, the Food, Stuff and Cosmetic and Disinfectant Act as well, the new draft out, you know, should we be addressing these as well? So I think with more conversation, education and awareness, it's going to play a little bit more into the consumer space, and consumers are going to become a little bit more, you know, a lot smarter about their decision-making process when it comes to it, because they're going to start looking at labels. They're going to start looking at, you know, these claims on products. You know, is this, you know, can I trust it when it says organic, when it says non-GMO, when it says plant-based or vegan? So I think they're going to do the research, and I think we need to kind of back it up and making sure we have our definitions in place, we have our standards in place, and that we do proper marketing around, you know, clarity, visibility, and also transparency when it comes to building trust around labels like the V-Label.
Super, super. Well, I like what you're saying, because I think it's doing it properly is the right way to do it, because that protects you, but it also protects me as the consumer. Donna, last question. Another audit. Can I piggyback this one with food safety, you know, or is this going to have to be a completely separate audit? Because you know how we love audits.
Yes, no, absolutely. No, I think at this point it is a separate audit, but potentially we could look at some form of integration to reduce the costs. But you know, if a client is doing a certification audit, potentially we could use the same auditor the next day. If there's travel involved, you know, all of those cost saving opportunities, we would most certainly, you know, look at that. But it is a different set of criteria, and yes, it's another audit.
It's another audit, and it's another audit to make our products safer, better quality, more authentic, and I suppose this is the world that we're living. At the end of the day, we want to be able to trust what's on the label, and that means it has to be scrutinized. Well, Donovan, Gulam, Donna, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for educating us on the V label to all those food manufacturers out there. I hope that you've learned a lot about another marketing opportunity for your vegan and vegetarian products. And we look forward to seeing what's going to happen in this space. And Donovan, look forward to seeing the results of your research. So keep us posted on that. Everybody, have a great Tuesday. Thanks for being with us on Talk Shop Tuesday. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.